Hello, and welcome to the first episode of In Too Deep, a podcast where I'm finding random educated people for my random educated topics. Just having a little banter, digesting it, and making it presentable to anyone who wants to listen. Today with me, I have Isaac Morlan.
Howdy.
So, Isaac, what's a little bit about yourself? Like, what makes you eligible to talk about this topic?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say that I'm just a citizen of the world, and that qualifies me enough to give an opinion about various things. But I also say that I'm a double major in philosophy and religious studies at the University of Northern Iowa. I have finished my religious studies program, and I'm in my last semester of the philosophy program. So I've done a good chunk of reading, and so hopefully that can provide maybe a more well-read perspective on some of these issues.
Yeah, sounds good. So, first question for you. What are some of the most prominent religions in the world, both now and throughout all of human history?
Yeah, this is a great question. I can say, like, confidently now, some of the biggest religions in the world are, like, the Abrahamic religions. Like, you have the number one is Christianity, which obviously is a very broad, a lot of these are broad terms, there's different denominations, but Christianity is number one, and really close to it right now is Islam, which is one of the fastest growing religions in the world. And then you have a lot of the dharmic faiths, if you want to clump them together, as another one would probably be third place for that. So things like Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, and other dharmic faiths were kind of like that. Yeah.
And definitely Greek gods, yeah.
Yeah, that one's died out a little bit. Well, I'll tell you what, Nordic, well, you could call it mythology, but Norse religious belief is probably one of, if not the fastest growing religious perspectives in the United States.
Interesting.
So even though we classify some of these as mythologies, sometimes they're growing.
So, when you said that, what differentiates it from the mythology to being an actual religion?
That is a very loaded question. That's a great question. So a lot of times, like pragmatically, when we say mythology, we say something that by consensus was pretty confidently not true. But it also can just refer to certain kind of stories, whether true or not. So even a lot of myths from things that people would consider to be true, even like Christianity, Islam, Judaism, or other dharmic faiths, like those things could be considered mythology as well.
Yeah.
It's oftentimes a certain kind of writing style or provides a certain kind of story that we can classify myths. So that would be like more of like from an academic standpoint, you could say that that's myth. But a lot of times I would say, yeah, practically it's things that by consensus we would say are not true.
Yeah. So, in your opinion, at least, why has humanity made so many different religions across the hundreds of years that we've been on this planet? And why is there so much variation between them, and why are there some that are almost identical just with different names?
That's a great question as well. I'll say a couple things. As far as like the history of religions in the world, I'll use it to answer a little bit of the last question as well and continue from there. Something like Hinduism has been like a very old religion that you could say is one of the most popular like in the past. It's difficult to know all the religions that have been like popular in the past because, you know, some religions may very well have been practiced prior to things being written down. And we know that for a fact, like archaeologically with things like Hinduism and whatnot. So it's always hard to prove that, but a lot of the dharmic faiths are pretty old when it comes to that. But why so many religions? There's a lot of perspectives on this. So I'll give a descriptive statement claim about this. I think a lot of people would say that it's a evolutionary process that occurs, or a response that occurs. We can't think and actually confront our death without going into a state of anxiety or angst, and that's a horrible state to be in. And so our brain tries really actively to not think about death as much as we can.
Yeah.
And so a lot of religious beliefs help us to get our minds off of that, to not go into that angsty point. Also, a lot of us just really want things to matter.
Or at least,
Yeah.
like, have it so that when we do die, it wasn't like we lived for nothing, or
Yeah.
that there's something better for us planned later.
Yeah, that's a desire that's in a lot of us. That's actually a really good point to point out. So I would say that some of it's like an evolutionary response. Some of it's also a power struggle. Without stepping on too many toes, there's a lot of religious groups who have risen to power, and it seems that you could make a very solidly backed claim that the people in power kind of created these things to keep them in power. And there's always throughout history people who want to be powerful.
Yeah.
And so you can find a lot of mythologies that are like that. Not to like make a claim that things are not true. Obviously, I have my own beliefs, but like for example, like Vedic Hinduism, you have the priests who are the only ones who could hear from the gods for some reason, and only could hear the revelation from the gods. And they were also the top of the caste system, and they were also the people that everyone had to serve. And so a lot of scholars look at that and they go, oh, well, maybe they created some of these things in order to maintain their own power, things like that.
So you kind of already discussed my next question, but how much, like, if you had to give a percentage, how much of it do you think is innately built into humans versus societal customs, or like those people that were in power?
Man, that's a hard question. My initial like intuition on that is that like a majority of the particulars are from societal customs or culture or something like that.
But then the belief itself is humanly innate.
Yeah, it's like when you go down into it, there's a lot of different certain pillars that kind of you find similarities within different religions. A lot of those seem innate to the kinds of questions that we can't prove. There's a difference between deductive and inductive research and arguments and things like that. Deductive are things that you can for sure prove through some sort of syllogism, which is two premises and a conclusion. We're like, okay, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. That's something that, because we know those things, we can conclude that A equals C. Whereas an inductive argument would be something like, oh, well, the sun has always risen and fallen, in the sky, sets and starts. It will tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can't really prove that. It probably will. That's something I can prove without. Now, that also depends, like, can we prove even, like, deductive things? Like, can we prove we exist? That's a whole other, like, branch of things. But there's two kinds of things. And I think a lot of times religion kind of digs at those, like, inductive issues where we can't prove them, but we really want to.
Yeah. Just kind of like a small aside, but it's just kind of interesting that you worded it that way, because it made me think of a scientific hypothesis. Yeah. How you already have like almost a predetermined idea of what you think is going to happen, and sometimes that happens perfectly fine. Other times your hypothesis is wrong, or it's just that the hypothesis has to change in certain conditions.
Oh, that's actually a great point, because you do really find that in a lot of religious, philosophical, mythological views, where there are some thinkers who look throughout history and they see a lot of religious belief and truth and even morals as an almost developing issue. It's very similar to science, that we find out the things that aren't true, those things get negated, and we push forward to truth. Very similarly to science. That's actually interesting.
So, next one for you. And we kind of already discussed this earlier, but what are the main differences between religion and mythology?
Yeah, I would say today, like, one of the biggest differences is how it actually plays out.
Because at one point they were essentially religions, and it's just that they've aged to the point where they are considered myth now.
Yeah, I mean, and I would totally agree. A lot of religions, actually, this makes me think, back in U.S. history, there was a time where when, you go register for something, like, legally, like, through the government, whatever it is, on the document that you fill out, it would be like, oh, what's your religion? And you would put down your profession, because, like, a religion religion is just the things that you do, the things
Yeah.
that you repeatedly do. And so in a lot of ways, that's kind of how I see the big difference between them today is religion are the ideologies that are like lived out today, and mythologies are kind of things that people aren't really living in anymore. And then again, like I was saying, that there's a lot of consensus that those things were just stories made up, and that's always difficult because some people would even claim that a lot of religions are mythologies. Like this could be a debated thing, and then again, you could just throw a lot of metaphysical stories, like things trying to make metaphysical claims. You could just throw them in mythology from a like a literature genre standpoint if you wanted to as well.
Or how everyone always says, like, they created deities to explain the natural phenomena that they couldn't explain at the time.
Yeah, that's the thing. I really like that perspective. A lot of mythology, religion, are like early versions of science. I think that really is true for some things. They're just trying to figure out why things happen the way that they do. They're trying to make a system for that. Just kind of like exactly like science. Actually, I would argue for some of these things. Some of them are not that way, and they're just imposing their own power over things. But a lot of times they're like, oh, even philosophers do this. Not even just like people writing myths. They say, oh well, like for example, like Aristotle. He's like, oh well, rocks fall because they share the same telos as the earth, the same end purpose, the intellecti, and so they fall to the ground because they want to be with their kind. And it's like, oh, well.
When rock doesn't want to exist in the first place.
Yeah, come on, man. What's going on? That's a great
point. What mythologies have shaped religion, and what religions have shaped mythology?
Oh, that's a great question. Again, it's like some of this is how you define it, but one that I think of like really greatly is Norse mythology, because there's two big texts in Norse mythology. There is the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. So the Poetic Edda is the much older one, but a vast majority of Norse mythology is from the Prose Edda. When they start writing in prose, and this was written by a Christian man. Like it was not a vast majority of Norse mythology was written by a guy who didn't actually believe in it. He was just writing stories.
Interesting.
But they were influenced from a previous mythology, but also influenced from a religion. So something like Norse mythology, it's kind of like a mix of both. Kind of becomes this conglomeration. Or like you have with Christianity, early Christianity, you have things that we would consider myth, like the tale of Gilgamesh or something like that. Other Mesopotamian gods and creation stories and mythologies seem to find their way and their influence into like the Bible, like the Old Testament, the Tanakh, and in the Torah. Like flood stories, or even relating to creation stories. It's like it seems that they find their influence, but that begs the question of like, does this point to a common truth or a common influence? And that's something that we can't prove, but that we spend a lot of scholarship trying to dig into that.
Yeah. So, kind of going back to the whole, is it innate or does it come from societal customs? How and why do you think that we find comfort in religion outside of what you've already said about it, making it so that we don't have to think about death as much?
I think another really big one outside of death is morality and ethics. Not so much that we're going to die or that like I need there to be something afterwards, but that there really is right, there really is wrong, there is good and bad. Because otherwise, my thinking of this little girl being brutally murdered or something like that, well, that's just your feelings.
Yeah.
You just don't like that. It makes you angry, and that's just because of your upbringing, or it's subject to yourself, or something like that. And religion provides an out where there is seemingly an objective answer to that. Yes, there actually is morals, because eternal truths, including morality, find their existence in some sort of metaphysical eternity. Whether it is, the classic tri-omni God, or some other eternal beings that exist in other religions. Yeah, I would say that's the biggest one. I also think, going off of that there are just some truths that we resonate with.
Yeah. I
Like,
mean, that's why you pick your own religion.
right, there's things that resonate with you. Like, oh, I find this beautiful, and this feels real.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just an escape from reality. It's just like, oh, sometimes things make us emotional. You watch a movie, you watch art, you read a text, you hear a message, you whatever it is, and things resonate with you. There are truths, sometimes even beyond words, that resonate with us. There are beauties that resonate with us deeply.
Mm-hmm. So, next one for you. What are, or I guess to preface, I know a lot of people have, that I've heard of, have started shifting away from just religion in general, but are trying to find their spirit, as they
Yeah,
want to
that's
put
really
it.
interesting.
So, what are the differences between being religious and being spiritual, both from a practice standpoint and from just like beliefs, ethics, morals, all that?
That is a fantastic question, and I think this is a really popular ongoing movement. It's part of something called New Age mysticism. New Age mysticism. People want to move away from organized religion. I think that's where a lot of this comes from. Um, they find that organized religion has too much man-made influence in it,
Mm-hmm.
too much the influence of humanity in it, and they find fallibility in organized religion of all kinds. And so people move away, but they still resonate with those truths that we talk about. They resonate with those
Yeah.
beauties. They resonate with the idea that things are right and things are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I mean, because at the end of the day, it's like a church still needs to keep the lights on and make sure the pastor and any other workers there are getting paid.
I mean, it's true. And for some churches, that comes across in a very businessy way, and that
Mm-hmm.
turns people off of that because they're like, you're just trying to get my money or something like
Yeah.
that. Or I disagree with some of your beliefs, and you're just saying those things. But
Mm-hmm.
these people, they still believe that there is like real good, real beauty, and things like that. And so they're still turning to some sort of metaphysical answer to these
Yeah.
things. That there is some sort of spiritual realm, and that's where I can ground these eternal truths of morality in something beyond the physical world.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some practices that end up getting associated with like being spiritual, and some of them are kind of true. I mean, I've had this is the not academic side of any of
Yeah.
this, but I've had the people try to give me crystals and say like, oh, it's charged in the moon, and they try to give me like tarot card reads. Like, I've had these things happen, really big into astrology, and I think a lot of those things actually have a lot to do with this. I'm not saying that most people who go to being spiritual or something like that are all in that, but it's a big movement. There's some really respected people in the kind of like philosophy realm who kind of go into this as well, where they would call themselves spiritual because they do believe that there is real good, but they're kind of agnostic on what it is because they can't prove it, or they have a belief that a lot of this good is beyond our kind of being able to explain it. They would still say that they're spiritual, or a lot of people like the Socrates method, that there's some sort of daemon, that's where we get demon, but it's just a spirit that kind of like gives that intuition of good or wrong like within us.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's enough for people to be like, yeah, I'm spiritual in that way.
Don't do this.
Yeah, don't do this. Yeah, I'm spiritual in that way.
Yeah. So, kind of building off of that, for people who are a little confused of if they're spiritual, if they're religious, my question for you was, my religion says blank, but I disagree with it. Am I still a practitioner of that religion, or am I something else, or how does that break down?
That's really great. There's a lot of paths you can take this. One thing is you can just reclaim the word religion. Maybe you don't like it. You can reclaim it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Go back to like, this is what I do, and I can still call myself religious. Or you know what, I disagree with my religion. I think a big thing that I've learned in some of my studies is a lot of times when you get into certain religions, people will say, well, the Quran says this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the Bible says this. The Bhagavad Gita says this. And it's like, okay, maybe it doesn't actually say that. Maybe people say that because the text can't talk, themselves. And there are things that, literally it is written X, Y, or Z. But that you know, we have our own interpretations. There's a whole branch of interpreting things. It's called hermeneutics.
Yep.
And that's where I would go with that. Is like, are you sure your religion's saying something? Like, religions are very, very diverse, like internally diverse. With even in one religion, people can have so many variety of beliefs. Like I've seen, this is going to be so out of left field, but furries. Let's talk about them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of like Muslim furries randomly like pop up in my feed recently.
Interesting.
I know this is going to sound like it's not related at all, but a lot of people would say, well, you know, the Quran or the Hadiths or something like that are like explicitly against dressing up as an animal or something like that. But these people don't care. For a lot of people, I think the question is like, how are you interpreting that? Is it a product of its time and place, and yet it's still true? Is it something that is equally as true, like literally, as it was then, it is now? How are you interpreting those things? Because you can find an interpretation that some people might be really upset about it because you kind of interpret it more as mythology, right?
Mm-hmm.
As something that was kind of written for a purpose, but that maybe it is divinely inspired. And so a lot of people will say that. But on the flip side of that, there really are tenets of religions. You know, are you really a Christian if you don't believe that Jesus existed? I mean, you know, this is a really hard question. At what point does the essence of the religion mean that you're not that person?
Yeah.
That is just a great question that I don't think I could define for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I do sometimes personally get upset when somebody's like, oh, I'm this religion, and it doesn't feel like they're really following that.
Yeah.
But for them, maybe it's more of a cultural identity thing. That's a really great question, Lyle. Honestly, I can't come to an answer on that.
I mean, I know that I personally used to struggle with, I did not like how the Bible represented Satan. Like,
sure.
Because at least in my perspective back then, it was like, what's really so wrong with trying to be someone who's perfect? Like, who wouldn't want that?
Right. Yeah, because that's even what he offers to, you know, like Eve's like, oh, I know that you're going to be like God. That's actually a really interesting course. Yeah, that's really interesting.
So, last one for you. And we've kind of discussed this before because we're both really into ethics and morality and all that sort of stuff. But at what point does something, either a behavior, a belief, or a physical action, something virtuous, become selfish or vicious, either to yourself, to your environment, or to someone else?
This is a really great question because it depends on how you're defining virtue and what system of ethics or morality that you have in the first place.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm going to use Aristotle because somehow everything comes back to these Greeks, right?
Yep.
He has this thing called the golden mean, that virtue lies between two extremes, deficiency and too much of something, right? And so he would say that it's not possible for a virtue to become selfish or vicious because it lies between them. Because some people would be like, well, I just really love helping people, and they take it too far to the point where it starts becoming harmful to themselves.
Yeah.
Or I really love being, you know, self-disciplined, and I go to the gym, but maybe it's starting to become about me, and I'm neglecting other things. Aristotle would say that's not a virtue anymore. You have gone too far or not enough. So instead of being self-disciplined, you're becoming self-absorbed or something like that, and that's actually a vice. That is not a virtue anymore.
Yeah.
So that's what Aristotle would say, but something like maybe more of like a Western religious perspective, like the Abrahamic faiths. You know, actually, I don't know if it's much different in a lot of those perspectives than I think of it. I think they're pretty compatible, but it would be the idea that maybe there's a mix of things. Part of it could be good, but there are parts of it that go too far, and that too far is when you're you're not taking care of the other things that God is calling you to take care of in your life. And that could be different for the individual. I don't know if you have more on that.
Well, I guess just for an example that
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people can kind of resonate with, and I don't know if this is actually real or just a story, but apparently Abraham Lincoln saved a pig from drowning in a mud pond, and someone asked him later, like he was on a carriage ride and just saw a pig that was drowning in a mud pond, and
There's no way, bro.
later someone asked him why he pulled the pig out of the mud and like why he was being so virtuous for a pig, and he said something along the lines of like it wasn't for the pig's sake, it was because if I didn't I wouldn't be able to sleep with myself.
Wow, that's really interesting. I've actually never heard that story before. I'm definitely telling people that. That's crazy. Pig lover. Look at that.
But so I feel like a lot of people, like, how do you quantify if something is you being selfish on the behalf of other people or if you're actually doing it for other people?
That is a great question. Well, I'll say two things. Selfish is not always a bad thing. Selfish is not always vicious.
Yeah.
Because I got to eat, bro.
Yeah.
I got to drink.
Yeah.
Those are like definitionally like selfish things. They're just not in that excess or deficiency or something like that. They're not things that we're not called to. So like sometimes a virtue can be selfish. Like it is a proper thing to, go work out. Like that's a good thing to do to take care of your health. And it is a selfish thing. So like not all selfish things are too far. But this is a really good question. I'm taking right now a business ethics and management class, and we're talking about whether or not ethics really have a place in business. Like are ethics counterintuitive to making money? And also what is the purpose of a business? And it raised this question. We were talking about bombas, the socks bombas.
Yeah.
Every single time you buy like a pair, they give like a pair to some like homeless kid or something like that. I don't know what it is, right? But the question is what they're doing like an altruistic, like selfless thing, or were they truly doing that because they knew that people...
It would ramp up sales.
Exactly, because people want to buy things and make themselves feel better.
Or like the whole, like, oh, if you buy this, then we plant a tree, or if you buy this, then we remove a pound of plastic from the ocean.
Yeah, right. That's the question. Is that just a marketing strategy, or is it something that they're actually trying to do to help out? And you know what? We can't assume other people's intentions,
morals,
their sincerity, right? And honestly, we're complicated human beings sometimes.
Yeah.
Am I doing this good thing because, like, simply just for goodness sake? Or am I doing this because it makes me feel good? Or is it possible that good moral things are simultaneously good for us and good for other people? That's probably where I would lie. That real good morality is not only good for us, but also good for other people. And so when it becomes purely like viciously selfish is when it is only because it is good for you and you don't actually care about what it is for the person.
Yeah.
That requires like introspection for the person to be able to figure out if that's true for them.
I mean, I heard a really good thing from my dad earlier tonight, but I kind of told him that we were going to do this episode and asked him his opinion on it. But he said that virtue is not something that's inside of you that you can control. It's something that you have to practice and to discipline. So, like, a action itself is not virtuous. It is your discipline to actually make that action, which is virtuous.
Yeah, it really is how you're intending those things, right? Like your motivation behind a certain action and why you're doing that thing kind of makes it, good or bad or virtuous. Though again, it also depends on your ethical perspective, because some people think that we can't help but only do things that are purely selfish. That's like egoism. There's like psychological egoism, like we only can do what we we want to do.
Yeah.
And then there's like ethical egoism, where the right thing to do is what we want to do all the time. And those like kind of work really well together. Like there's perspectives where like, hey, we really only can be selfish, or like that the objective like right thing to do is just what produces the best outcome. And if that means being selfish, like in what would be a previously considered vicious way, that's actually the right thing to do. So it really depends on your ethical perspective. But I agree with your dad that regardless of your ethical perspective, what you're tending towards with the motivation is really a lot of times what makes it. Because even in something like utilitarianism, a lot of times it's like what you could perceive as producing the best outcome is the right thing to do. Because we can't know the future, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, have any other insight that I haven't asked you but that you want to share? Any other knowledge drops?
Oh, gosh. Well, first of all, I want to say thanks for doing this. This is really fun. I know I haven't gone necessarily super duper deep on some of these because, we could get specific about certain, mythologies or something like that for some of these questions. So if you want to go into those, we totally can. But I also see that potentially on the agenda is...
Quick editor's note. This is where we slowly start to spiral. So I call this Layman's Dive 1.5 if you want to. Essentially, we just kind of start to have fun and discuss random topics that aren't as relevant to the episode, but you can still get a little bit of insight and fun from it. So if you want to keep listening, then feel free to do so. If not, then thank you for listening.
Random topic.
Yeah.
So
anything
we could just dive into anything, man. We really could. We could get crazy. Maybe not too crazy. Let's not burn down this place, but we could get crazy, man.
Let's discuss my favorite book.
Let's do it.
Monkey.
Your favorite book? Oh my gosh.
Sung
yeah,
Woo
I know
Kong.
where we're going.
Sung Woo Kong.
Oh my gosh.
Mr.
Journey to the where?
Somewhere.
Somewhere, yeah.
So, obviously, he is one of the biggest mythologies to turn into, like, modern day media. Not even modern day, just throughout time. Like,
yeah, this was just so interesting because he's not even the main character.
Yeah.
But yet people love this guy so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he is just like, for anyone who doesn't know, just like read it. It is so good. But he essentially says F you to any person in power above him. He just doesn't care. Like, he's a monkey born from a stone on a special magical mountain and eats some fruit of immortality and gets put in a pot that essentially gives him like X-ray vision and like
relatable.
He trains and just like is able to do all these magical things, and he fights monsters literally every day. And he's like, oh, this 528,000 kilogram baton that can magically shrink or grow size.
Yeah, right.
And he just casually fights a sea dragon for it. And he's like, this is mine now. Thanks.
Dude, I think the reason why Wukong resonates with so many people love the OP MC, right?
Yeah.
They love the main character that's just so OP. Like, I know we're both anime guys, so well, first of all, like, Son Goku is based off of, like, all of Dragon Ball is based off of not only Wukong, but Journey to the East.
Mm-hmm.
And
Journey to the Dragon Ball.
Journey to the Dragon Ball, right? And I just think it resonates with people because it's like this triumphant destruction of like good over evil, or like destroying like authority.
Well,
like across all these different kinds of all societies, cultures, the story of like authoritarianism just being destroyed seems to resonate with people. And this is what Wukong's doing, man. You know, all these people that are powerful, and maybe not all of them are like horrible, but like all these powerful beings and gods. I'll do it. I'll solo them.
I mean, I would say towards the beginning and middle of the story, at least, like, he's definitely at least chaotic neutral, if not a little bit chaotic
Dang, we're
evil.
getting D&D up in here. That's wild.
But like towards the end of the story, because he gets trapped by Buddha and gets sealed under a mountain until Buddha sends the what's his name, the priest guy who's doing the actual journey, to use him as a bodyguard essentially, and so he just picks up the mountain and he gets trapped with a golden headband, and anytime he resists, then he just kind of like the band squeezes around him and essentially kills him, but not enough. But yeah, more towards the end of the story, like he builds his relationship with that priest guy and the other bodyguards that are on the trip, and actually starts to care about them a little bit. And like I would say, more towards the end, he's just like a neutral. Maybe still a little chaotic, but
Yeah.
maybe chaotic good.
Yeah, I probably chaotic good, but maybe that's just because I resonate with him. Yeah, Journey to the West is such a. Sorry, I said East earlier because I was thinking of like Eastern religion because it's
Yeah.
you know an Eastern religion, but Journey to the West is such an influential story, and yeah, and then obviously we got Black Myth Wukong
Let's
recently,
go.
which has like these souls. It's a souls.
Yeah, not
game.
Dark Souls.
It's funny that you bring up like the D&D like system of how to describe and categorize. You know, there's just 9 different categories of how you can slot somebody on their ethics and their morality and how they're based on and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
This is something like mildly related that I've been thinking about recently, is that like this Jesus guy, right? All of a sudden we have like a direct link to our conversation right here. So like D&D as a whole, Dungeons and Dragons, was based off of the Tolkien world that he built. You know, Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and Middle Earth and all of these other books and languages he met. He originally created it because England didn't have a mythology for itself. And he was like, I'm gonna make one. But he wanted to make it an allegory for the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so through all these things, he made all this. And then all of a sudden, you have Dungeons & Dragons. They create this system. So you have things like, Stranger Things and Free Run. I don't know if you saw Free Run. It's a great show. With these things that are like based off of D&D, which is just completely and utterly directly based off of, the Lord of the Rings, like Tolkien. And that's just completely and utterly based off of the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Like this, not only just this battle of good and evil, but of atonement.
Fly, you fools!
Yeah, right. Again, because I think the truths, I'll say like the truths of the gospel really resonate with people.
Mm-hmm.
I think for a very good reason. But it's like, we're slotting. We're slotting a character from Journey to the West, which is like an Eastern religion thing, in a category from Dungeons and Dragons, which is based off of a world built by a guy who based it off of an allegory from a Middle Eastern religion / myth that was founded in originates at the beginning of it in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've just connected so much of the world all together. 3 different continents already mixed together, and even the Bible goes into Europe and Africa and Asia, and yeah, that's crazy stuff, man. Well, and The Hobbit, oh my gosh, is filmed in New Zealand, so now we have Oceania. I mean, what are we missing here, man? We could combine a whole slew of the world somehow.
Or South America.
Brazil. Dude, they love Goku.
Yeah, I know.
Come on, let's just say it. They love Goku, man.
When's the mega statue of Goku the Redeemer coming?
Man, I really hope so soon. Even in America, we're toppling down statues. That pigeon's going. I don't know if you saw that. They're getting rid of the pigeon, replacing it with like a Buddha or something like that. Which, shout out, Buddha or whatever. But I love birds. But maybe instead of Buddha, we just put Goku there, and say it's also a reflection of Dharmic faith because it's, based off of Journey to the West.
Or supersonic.
Oh, supersonic. Okay.
I mean,
Sega's
he's essentially Goku.
I mean, by the way, this is like actually knowledge, by the way. That this is knowledge that like supersonic was like actually based off of Goku. Like this is not a secret or anything like that. So we could do that. It's a Japanese company based off of, not only based off that, but like, Japanese company. They have the Dharmic faith. They're like the Shinto Buddhism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can go there. Yeah.
I don't know. I was just making a random remark.
Well, hey, man. I think it still connects.
Yeah. I mean, anything can connect because we are all made of carbon. Science.
We're made of carbon and, oh my gosh. I'm not the science guy. You're the science guy.
Full Metal Alchemist. Do you know the measurements off the top of your head?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I don't, but I've been watching Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood recently.
Good.
And there's some really interesting stuff. In the intro, they have a bunch of symbols that are supposed to be like, like magic and stuff
Alchemy.
like that. But there's like, unironically, like some Hebrew in there.
Interesting.
And this is going to get crazy. And I saw there and I was reading it and it said, Sephirot in Hebrew.
Huh.
Which is it's a Hebrew word for understanding. It's one of the tenets of understanding the infiniteness of God in the finite. But the plural of it, Sephiroth. Sephiroth. Whoa, guys, let's get crazy here. Like the Final Fantasy character.
Mm-hmm.
And so you find that a lot of like JRPGs like find a lot of their influence from like old ancient Near East myth. I mean, there's even a character like a Gilgamesh is in Final Fantasy, and other like Abrahamic faiths and stuff like that. They have like a fascination with them. So we have a link.
A link between worlds.
Oh my gosh,
Triforce.
Dude, everything goes back to Japan. I think we should just move to Japan, because everything just head back to Japan.
It's where the sun rises.
It's the land of the sun or whatever they call it. Maybe civilization didn't originate in Africa. Maybe it originated
in Australia.
Okay. In Australia, I don't know, man. They talk weird there. There's no way that's where we got started. That's the land of...
Why else would there be so many random creations if life didn't start there? There had to be the mess-ups before they got the final products.
It does feel mildly... Okay, let's think about this, though. If it feels less evolved, does that mean that it's older or newer? Because they have like these seemingly primordial, these primordial just eldritch monsters living in Australia. If it seems more like old, doesn't that mean that it's actually newer? Because it hasn't evolved as much. So,
I mean, if you look at it, like octopodes, crocodiles, alligators, lots of lizards, lots of crustaceans. Like, they haven't changed. And they're some of the oldest. Did you know that the first crocodile, at least according to science, I don't know how this works in religion, and that's a topic for another day.
Sure.
But according to just like the raw numbers that I've seen online, reading articles, the first crocodile was at least 10 million years before the first tree.
Okay, I think sharks are also older than trees too,
yeah.
or something dumb like this. I've heard someone before. I would believe it. So like, even though I'm like, academically like philosophically inclined and like religious studies inclined.
Yes.
Grammar, it's okay. I know nothing about grammar. I actually, I actually think evolution finds can find compatibility with Christianity better than some other religions, and I'll explain why. Genre is really important to consider when you're reading something to understand it, right? If you go into something knowing that the genre was intentionally fantasy, when they do magic, you're not gonna be like, come on, that's stupid. But like if you're reading something that's supposed to be some sort of like
historical text, like
you're not gonna assume they're like, oh, that happened because of magic. The genre really changes how you read something. And actually, like the first 3 chapters of of the Bible in Genesis, of the Torah, are not the same genre as some other parts of Genesis and even the rest of the Bible. Because there's so many genres in the Bible. You have like ancient Near East myth as a genre. You have poetry. You have historiographies. You even have just like straight up like letters written to people. Bunch of different genres. And the first 3 chapters of Scripture are supposed to be poetry. The defining characteristic of Hebrew poetry is parallelism. You have one thing on one side. I rise in the morning, and I go to bed in the evening. Lyle lays on my left, and I reside on his right. They don't do rhyming. They do stuff like that. And, in the beginning of Scripture, you just have these back and forths of that. What was made on day 1 is made for day 4, and 2 for 5, and 3 for 6. And you have these parallelisms over and over again. So you can ask scholars, you can look into it. The first 3 chapters are really meant to be, like these creation stories are actually meant to be poetry. And so you can look at that and be like, man, this is poetry of somebody praising their God for what they have done, and they've beautifully created these things. And there are these truths, even like Adam and Eve, these truths maybe of mankind resonates through these things. People can interpret these things completely differently, but that actually lends its way well to science being super compatible with Scripture, because you don't actually have a like quote unquote canon scientifically based cosmology, like creation of the universe, because it's supposed to be just a poem. Because some of the poems, David says, God, you've abandoned me. Oh, that's not really true. The next chapter, he's like, oh, yeah, that actually never happened. Scratch that. That's not, whatever. Yeah. But it's because it's supposed to be poetry. It's supposed to be honest. And it's not necessarily supposed to be taken literally.
It's how you feel.
Yeah, right. Like, and, some people even look at the original, like, thanks for bringing up the literally thing. They'll look at, first 3 chapters of Genesis and say, oh, well, those days aren't literal, so we can make it compatible. But the order of creation, man, that's not the same according to science. A lot of it's just really out of order there. But if you see it as poetry, then you start realizing, like, oh, I can actually put these things together. And this is a whole side tangent. Like some other religions don't have the flexibility of different genre within their religious text to be able to combine signs with it. And so then you have to either become choosy or you have to read the whole thing as mythology a lot of times. If you want to reconcile it, I would say consistently. I mean, people can reconcile and kind of choose their own beliefs if they want. It doesn't mean that they're consistent.
Yeah. And it's also just like, who's to say, well, first off, one, like, just going back to human ancient history, it's like, who's to say that a day for them was the same as a day for us? Like, maybe that's, you would know the translation better, but who knows if that's what it actually meant. Or from a poetry standpoint, like, what's a day to a immortal God?
Right. I mean, Scripture itself even says like, oh, a day's like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day for God. So like these things are very, very nebulous, and they don't always have to be so concrete. I mean, some people really stick to them. Like you can go to the this is no like dogging on them. You can go to the Creation Museum today and be like, oh, like they're gonna spend time really reconciling Scripture literally, and that's totally cool because it's actually, if you really think about it, they're trying to uphold a certain quality of their God, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to interpret that way. And a lot of scholars would say that it was never intended to be interpreted the way that the people are. But that's what the point of scholarship and digging into these things for yourself are for.
Well, that is all I have for you. Any other remarks? Quick things?
I'll just put something out there. I'll give a fun fact, and I'll do a philosophical thought out for you. I'll do the fun fact first. Hyraxes. I know you're familiar with them because of our conversations, but I will enlighten some people that might listen to this. Hyraxes are these little. Look them up. I'm serious. If you're listening right now, look it up. They're these tiny little fuzzy creatures.
Old guys.
You would think that they're rodents. They're not at all. But they're like the closest relative to elephants, and they're like super small. And they have their own syntax within their language. Like they don't have like a language like we would say, but they have like a variety of different screeches that can mean certain things to them, which I think is crazy. They have suction cups on their feet.
Mm-hmm.
which is genuinely insane that an animal could have that. Seriously, look these things up. And also, it's the reason why Spain is called Spain. Because, when the Phoenicians came in, Western Europe, they get to Spain, they see all these rabbits. They've never seen rabbits before. So, like, oh, well, these look like, these are obviously just weird hyraxes. Because that's what they knew. And so they name it España, which is like land of the hyraxes. There's no hyraxes in Spain at all, but that's why it's called that. So these weird little freaky, related to elephant creatures. That you're not allowed to eat, by the way, according to the Levitical laws of the Bible. If you're living underneath those things, mentioned 4 times. That's why it's called Spain.
Interesting.
Yes. Philosophically, here's what I'll say. I've been wondering this recently. A lot of times, people look at evolution as like, oh, that's the end all be all for like certain like theistic beliefs. But it makes you wonder, like, okay, and this is where it goes back. Oh, well, what about all these other constants in the universe? Like, not only do you still have to go from non-life to life, but what about other constants in the universe? Like, I mean, you could probably speak to more about the constants in science than I can. You have the force of the electron. You have the atomic force. You have the cosmic constant. You have gravity's exactly the way it was. That if it was even slightly different, things wouldn't be that way, right?
Yeah, I mean, and another thing to note too is in science there is a difference between a theory and a law. But essentially, like, since he had the idea of evolution being a thing and he was proven correct, essentially, it got turned into a theory. And then a law is something that is, at least right now, undeniable, like unchangeable. But theories can be edited later in the future.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And it's also just like, I mean, obviously he can't know everything. Like, evolution takes a very long time, and there are so many variations with genetics and environment and everything else. But yeah, like, time-wise, and there are so many things about creatures that we don't know. Like,
I believe that.
Did you know that octopodes can RNA edit? They can edit their own genome whenever they want. So
what does that play out like? I don't know at all.
Okay, so DNA, if you want to think about it this way, is like raw binary code.
Yeah.
And RNA is what actually helps. It's like a software that turns it from binary into a website.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
Yeah. So it helps you build up your proteins and form anything else that your body needs it to. But if squids wanted wings, then instead of it taking like millions of years, or however you want to think about it, like, let's say 10 generations, it would take like 2.
Okay, so it increases its rate of evolution, or is it also just like, if they can do it like that, is it just like change their phenotypical expressions or something like that? Like, how does it play out, like, that they can just change their, like,
so
RNA?
Essentially, they can edit certain genomes and either cut them out, put them somewhere else, or reorganize their nucleotides. And so it won't, to some extent, depending on what the squid or octopus wants it to do, it can affect that organism itself, or it can just be helpful for its lineage.
Interesting. So how do we see that play out, like, as we've observed them?
Like, for example, there used to not be any Arctic squid, and in two generations, they edited their RNA to make it so that they could withstand those colder temperatures while being in.
They wanted to go there. I mean, I'm sure there's a bunch of food there that, like, untapped resources. Like, we gotta evolve. This reminds me of, like, Tier Zoo. I don't know if you've watched this, but it's a channel that literally just, like, makes entire videos, like, ranking as if it was a tier list of, like, if this was like a game or something, like real life evolution was a game.
Mm-hmm.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
So
don't.
they would be S tier.
Oh, that's crazy. I didn't even know they could do that. But the idea is like, okay, I'm glad you brought up like that evolution takes a really long time, because the reality is like the chances. I've heard this said before, like the chances of things evolving, us evolving the way that we have to the point where we are as advanced as we are right now, given the time that we have had, is like so low. Like in all
Yeah.
reality, the sun should have exploded like a gajillion times.
Well, even
Like
if
millions upon to the power of millions times in a row. Like it would be like the most ridiculously lucky thing ever. So a lot of people would look at that and say that evolution still needs God, not only to go from non-life to life, but also for it to happen as fast as it did, in the way that it did. And then you have all those constants still too.
and it's also just like the human body, like why I'm a biochem major. The human body is one of the most complex systems to ever exist on this planet.
Oh, I believe
Because
that.
for atoms to bond together, that releases energy. For atoms to break, at least in normal conditions, for atoms to break, it takes energy. But for just the fact that cells, one single cell is a thing, is already like at least a 1 in a trillion
Well, not only
chance.
that, but dude, I took a biology class. We don't even know really how eukaryotic organisms even came into being as it is, because like I've heard this thing about like protocells. They this protocell ate this protocell, and then there were two of them. Okay, why does reproducing mean that there'd be two of them still there too? And they're like, oh, we don't know yet. It's like, oh, what the?
Yeah.
That's crazy. But then some people would say, well, there could be an infinite number of universes. Think about the multiverse. Then these constants. There's a good, like almost an infinite number of universes where the constants were different and everything just was catastrophic. My question to that is like, what keeps like a multiverse together?
See, my question to that is, which one am I Iron Man in? Like, world
I just had a vision.
1863.
There's actually more universes than not where you're Iron Man. I just had a vision right now
Yo.
that just happened.
Yo.
But yeah, it's like, what keeps the multiverse together?
Yeah.
Like, if there are constants that keep this universe together, and we can conceptualize the idea of there being a multiverse, some sort of like stable idea of a multiverse, what keeps those in existence? Okay, so then we have constants for multiverses. Well, that's why we have an omniverse. Okay, what keeps the omniverse together? You have constants there. And so like when people use, like agnostics or skeptics or atheists or whatever, they use like the idea of like infinite multiverse to be like, okay, look at all the constants in this universe. That doesn't matter. There's like infinite universes. What keeps all of those like stable as even existing in the first place? Out like almost like as like a cosmic level gravity or something like that. But it's not like gravity, like, but like what even keeps those things together? Like as you move up this ladder of going outer in these outer circles of different things, what even keeps those together? And the answer is like, oh, I don't know that either.
Yeah.
So we just happen to live in the omniverse. And there's only one, apparently. We live in the omniverse, and it just happens to be that it just keeps itself together, right? So it's like, even if you want to say that, you go up the ladder, and it's like, okay, somehow everything just happened to be that things could exist. And to me, that's like the beautiful part about life. I'm really thankful for that. I think that's why we need God, at least philosophically, scientifically, and personally as well.
Well, thank you for joining me, sir. It was lovely
a
to
pleasure.
chat.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you guys for listening, and we will tune back in with episode 2. I will be discussing genetics and if there is a genetic disposition for someone who's interested in art or interested in sport.
Oh, that's really interesting.
With Dr. Raquel from my old university. But stay tuned and catch you guys next time.